Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hello, and welcome to episode 75 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. My name is Sarah Wasco. I am joined by my colleague, Roxanne Rapsky, and we created this podcast to bring information related to franchising and business ownership. And we are thrilled to welcome our guest today, Dick Cassidy. Dick is the former owner of Image 212 graphics and signs that change the world. And Dick grew a successful business and recently sold that business. And so we invited him on the show today to share his experiences with us and kind of some of what he learned about during his time as owning a business. So Dick, welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Roxanne. It's great to be here and excited to participate in your podcast today.
Thanks so much. So, one thing we talk with our clients about all the time is not needing industry experience. So we always like for our guests to share a little bit of their background and how they ended up purchasing the business that they purchased and kind of what they did before. So Dick, your career was in medical device sales. So tell us a little bit about kind of what led you into leaving that and kind of deciding you might want to own a business.
Sure. Well, I had a 30-year career in medical devices and held a variety of roles, primarily in the sales and marketing side of the business. And had spent probably about 2,700 nights of my life traveling around in hotel rooms. And that's a lot. I think it's about 7.5 years of my life I've lived in a hotel, and I've flown 5 million miles around the world in that capacity. So finally in 2018, I had opportunity to retire. So I took advantage of that and retired in 2018. But I'm a pretty high energy guy, so I knew that I wasn't going to sit at home and do nothing. So meanwhile, somebody named Sarah calls me up on the phone and we end up meeting for coffee and talked about a few different business opportunities. And that's when the opportunity with Sign World came up, this kind of a sign and graphics company in the sign and graphics business. So that's kind of what led me to get into business. And when I first met with you, we had I think we talked about a couple different other opportunities, maybe in the fitness world. And
so I have a couple of memories of our first interaction. You reminded me, I had forgotten that we had some meetings set up and I don't think you had retired yet and you were busy and ended up having to cancel for various reasons for work. And then you stepped away, exited, and you're like, okay, I'm ready. Mm-hmm. And so that was in November of 2018. So we had our coffee, and then you participated in one of our educational webinars, and Sign World had presented, and that really piqued your interest at that point. So we met and evolved, from there in terms of researching opportunities. One thing that really stood out, you pointed out how much travel you had done, and I still remember bringing to your attention a certain part of the Metroplex, maybe that was growing or whatever, when we were talking about businesses, and you go, where's that? And I was like, you don't know where Alliance is? Alliance Town Center and the airport? And he's like, no, I'm gone all week, every week. And on the weekends, I just enjoy being at home. So anyway, I just still remember that. And we do have quite a few clients that have had to travel a lot. And so owning a business is appealing because in most cases, you don't have to travel for your business.
Right.
So you looked at the sign business in much detail. As we kind of mentioned, obviously the business that you bought is Sign World, but it's a little unique. So tell us about your due diligence and kind of what you learned and how you evolved.
What attracted you to Sign World?
Yes,
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, when I sat on and watched that webinar that you guys put on, the sign and graphics industry, I had never, I probably had purchased a sign before in my career in sales and marketing.
some point.
when I looked at this industry, to me, it seemed very simple. And I liked that. There weren't a lot of regulatory bodies going to tell me what to do or how to run my business. And it was cool because I'm a visual person. You could see and you could make some really cool things. So as I got into that, and so I started doing my research. And I literally, I'm a research kind of guy. So I think I looked at maybe 40 or 50 sign companies when I was doing my due diligence. I went on discovery days with, 4 other sign and graphics franchises. Not just because I wanted to learn, right? I wanted to understand what is the sign and graphics business all about.
Unbeknownst to your franchise consultant.
Yeah, I knew 1 or 2. I don't think I knew about all 4 of those.
Yeah.
So this was like a big aha awakening for me prepping for this podcast.
Yeah, but as I went through that, obviously there's a lot of great franchises out there, a lot of great companies out there, and I learned something every time I went to one of these various different franchises, and so I kind of pulled information, the good, the bad, and the ugly from all of these different experiences. But really, what stood out for me with Sign World is. Sign World was unique because it is not a franchise, as you guys know. It's a business opportunity, and there's no rules and there's no royalties. But the bigger thing for me is it was going to give me an opportunity to build my brand, build my business, and really take all the things that I had learned from these various, trips to all these other franchise discovery days, and really kind of mold it into something that was going to be, my company. And the other thing is that it gave me an opportunity. You could build a business as big as you want, as fast as you want, anywhere you want from a single location with Sign World. And that was another thing that was pretty unique. And that ended up benefiting me in the long run, right?
So just to recap,
Sure.
Kind of go over the differences. So usually when you invest in a franchise, you have a certain amount of zip codes that you can operate within. Mm-hmm. You have a territory. So that was you didn't have that with Sign World. That's
Right.
what you mean by you could operate anywhere. And then the other thing is when you talked about building your own brand, usually when you invest in a franchise, you're operating under whatever that brand's name is, for instance, Taco Bell, something everybody knows,
Right.
but you didn't have to operate under Sign World or another franchise name. You got to create your own name and build that brand.
Exactly. And one of the things that I learned when I was doing my due diligence, right, is that there's some benefit for having a brand name, but there's also some negativity. So if you go into a market that has a certain brand that has had a bad experience with it, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball before you even started. Yeah. But really, the biggest thing for me is I wanted to build my own brand, right? I had an idea. I had something that I wanted to do, something that was going to make my brand stand out. And that's what I wanted to do. And that was the cool thing about Sign World.
So tell us, I remember you had your idea. Tell us how you came up with Image 212.
Yeah, well, I think the whole 212 degree concept probably entered my life maybe a decade before that. I remember I was in Las Vegas at some trade show, and I was at Kinko's making some copies, and I looked down, I see this book that's 212 degrees, and I was like, well, that's interesting. So I started looking at it, and so the name of my company is Image 212, Image 212 degrees. So 212 degrees is really all about the extra degree, right? So at 211 degrees, water is hot. 212 degrees, it boils, and in boiling water turns to steam, and steam can power a train, and a train changed the world, right? So that one extra degree that you bring to whatever it is that you do can literally change the world and change a customer's experience. So when I had a chance to come in and talk to, and build my own company, it's like, it just made sense, right? I had done a sales meeting at my former company about, 212 degrees. I mean, I still to this day have my little, 212 degree extra degree bracelets that I wear on, because that's my life. That's what I do. That's the way I operate my life. And so I got to build a company around, what I'm all about.
Wow, that's amazing. And I didn't know that. And I've never heard of that book. And now I need to investigate.
Yeah. So it's Image 212, graphics and signs that change the world. So you did a lot of research. Did it intimidate you? I know some of the feedback or concerns that we get from prospective owners of sign companies is there's lots of sign companies. Is there too much competition? So did that intimidate you at all as you were making this decision?
No, actually, that was one of the things that motivated me, right? Is that, I'm in Dallas. I think there's 450 sign companies in the DFW Metroplex, right? Which, seems like a lot, right? I bet we could use 900. There's so many opportunities with signs available. And you just, our president tells the story. If you go into a commercial aircraft, you go into the restroom, there's 15 signs in the restroom of a commercial aircraft. I've never counted that, but it sounds probably about right. You drive down the highway there and you see signs everywhere. And then 98% of signs are inside. So it's just a humongous industry. And when I looked at it, it's, and these things change and they evolve over time. So to me, it wasn't intimidating. It was kind of like huge opportunities and an opportunity to build something, is the way I looked at it. So,
well, and then I think the other thing with those internal signs that you said, 98% of those internal signs, don't they change frequently?
They do, right? And that's the other thing is that, the average life of a sign, because, the situation is changing, evolves like every 30 days, right? So there's so many different opportunities and, signs are literally, it's really more than, it's visual communication solutions, right? What does that mean even, right? It's like anything that you can visually look at and communicate to somebody, that's what we do, right? So that could be everything from a huge electronic message center that you'll see at Cowboy Stadium, all the way down to a room identification sign, to even a small business card or floor graphics, elevator graphics. It's endless.
Car wraps,
exactly. And you get to make some really cool stuff, and it's visually very appealing. And that's one of the things that got me excited about it, is you got to make cool stuff and help other people build their companies up, right? So we're kind of in the building brands and building businesses business. That's what we do.
So on that note of signs changing pretty regularly, didn't you open in February of 2020?
End of January, February 1st, 2020. Yeah, end of January, February 1st, 2020. Exactly.
And we all know what happened in March.
Right.
And there was a lot of conversation during that time and then after that time when we were reflective of the industries that have done well and the industries that were struggling. Yeah. A lot of conversation was around sign companies because these businesses were having to pivot during that time. You had just opened,
right, and
a lot of people were having to make signs in their businesses to direct people certain ways or tell them, certain protocol or whatever. Yeah, the right. Spacing and just all of those things. So how did that impact you as you had just opened and then the world made a big shutdown, essentially?
Sure. Well, I knew it was serious when they canceled, the NCAA wrestling tournament in March. So I knew that we were in a serious, something big was going on, right? But in all seriousness, that it really had very little impact, positive or negative. And I think that's the thing about, if you think about the sign and graphics industry, that industry is, I don't know if it's recession proof, but it's definitely recession resistant, right? Because companies are going out of business, they need signs that they're going out of business. If they're restructuring, they need signs that they're restructuring. If they're, starting up, they need signs. So there's very little economic impact, that's going to have a huge negative effect on the sign and graphics industry. So to me, you just, you maybe adapt a little bit. So we ended up, in a situation where we got a call from this company that needed to wrap their 750 vehicle fleet, the Texas State Troopers, right? And they said the company we've been working with, we're not happy with, we're not satisfied with it. So we needed to come in and show us what you can do. So 10 minutes later, I'm at the foot of his office talking to him about this opportunity, and so he gave us a trial. I had a guy that I was able to hire to come in and wrap 5 vehicles, check the quality of our work. And then after that, he said, well, he goes, you got it. So after that led us to, getting our foot, in the door. And we ended up wrapping 750 of the Texas State Trooper vehicles kind of month 2.
Month 2. That's what I was going to ask. So you were cash flow positive at what point?
At first month, actually.
Wow.
Which is the average. The average owner is cash flow positive in 6 months. We were cash flow positive in the first month. And that, so that, initial opportunity, it kind of, we didn't make a huge amount of money on it because, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but it sounded good, right? But it kept us going. I learned a ton. And that's the whole thing about this industry, right? Is that I knew nothing about signs and graphics when I started. And every single day you learn something new. And if you take advantage of those learning opportunities, you can just keep growing and growing. And that's what we try to take advantage of, is learning from everything every day.
And it took a while. It took a period of time to get all those vehicles wrapped, right?
It did. I think that ended up going for most, probably 8 or 9 months, because we could only do a certain number, every week. And it was, but that wasn't the only thing we were doing. And I actually had a 1099 person that helped me to do all those wraps.
So with that being said, you're not limited by X number of employees. You were able to subcontract some things out. And then also, were you able to potentially collaborate with other owners? So even though it's not a true franchise, there's still other owners. And how do you work together, or do you feel you're competitors, or share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's such a different industry from the industry I came from. I came from one of the most uber competitive industries in the world, right? Medical devices. I mean, it was a bloodbath. They pay people a ton of money to do what they're doing. It's highly, highly competitive. The sign and graphics industry, I look at it as being just the opposite. I see it as one of the most collaborative things that I've ever done. I mean, we were doing business with probably 20 different sign companies when I sold my company. And one of the first jobs that we did was in Atlanta, Georgia, right? I'm in Dallas, Texas, but I worked with somebody in the medical device space, and they needed help with their national sales meeting, right? So I think this is before I even had my building. I remember that. Right? Uh-huh. And I even called up Sign World. I called up, Ken and Jack, and I said, hey, I've got this opportunity. It could be huge, right? And I'm all about, making things happen. So, and they're like, yeah, I wouldn't do that, and I'm like, why? I'm like, this is huge. Yeah, but you don't know what you're doing. I'm like,
I'll figure it out.
Exactly, yeah. Right? So they didn't want to see me fail, right? And that's not, so it wasn't that they gave bad advice, right? They just wanted, I think the normal thing is let's ease into this, right?
Right.
But I was like, let's make this happen, because if I can figure out how to do all these things. So we ended up in that first job, it was in Atlanta, but we had to do we ended up doing floor graphics, elevator graphics, window graphics. We did custom boxes. We had t-shirts, we had hats, we had trade show displays. We ended up doing an augmented reality 3D video, right? This was, and I had 3 weeks to do it, right? But the cool thing is that, I toured around all these sign companies, and guess what? I learned a bunch of people that knew how to do all that stuff, right? So I'm calling all these different people. I'm like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? So I had all these people that were saying, yeah, I can help you. So that was the cool thing about the industry, is it was such a collaborative entrance into the sign and graphics business. Then it's in Atlanta, right? So I needed an installer. I'm like, I don't have an installer. So, I went to the network. There's 3M, one of our preferred partners, has this group. You could go online, you could find an installer in Atlanta. I went online. There was, probably a dozen people. Ended up calling one. Somebody called me back immediately. And, we talked a couple times on the phone. He was super responsive on the phone. We said, yeah, I can definitely help you out. So I went down there, met with him, and, took the graphics with me, and he did the install, and it was, that was like welcome to signs and graphics,
that's
right?
Awesome.
What a way to get your feet wet. Yeah. But like you said, it was fun. And maybe because it was in the beginning, you weren't super busy with other projects, so you could focus your attention on that, especially since you hadn't even opened yet. But I mean, how many businesses can really be operating and generating revenue before they're open? That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. And I know Ken, back in the day, would really push people. I think there were an X amount of cards, business cards you were supposed to hand out before you even opened your doors, because he wanted you to have business when you were training. You could make them in someone else's shop when you were training. Just he wanted you to have that money coming in the door. Yeah.
And that's honestly what, not just for me, but I would say that's what happens with most owners, right? They have business coming in before they even open their doors, right? Because we didn't open until, February 1st, I think technically was our first grand opening day or whatever. And, we had, our website had been live for probably about 2 months prior to that. And that's the,
and we all have a network, right? We all have a network of people, and just reaching out and letting those people know what you're doing. And
in your 30 years of travel, you had met people all over the place.
Well, that's how I got my first order, right? Is that I had a relationship with that person in a past life, right? And it was worked out. So
they trusted you.
Yeah.
So I want to back up a little bit. I want to talk about the conversation you had with your dad when you were doing your research. And I also want you to talk about the entrepreneurship that runs in your family, because I think that you always kind of wanted to own your own business, didn't you? So we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, so with my dad, I remember my dad. He had just moved here. It was a couple months after my mom passed away, and he was in Florida, but we moved him up to Dallas because it was time for him to be here. And I remember sitting down with him. We were talking. He goes, "Well, what do you know about signs and graphics?" I said, "Absolutely nothing." He goes, "You'll do great." And
which is not the response that I was expecting when you told that story.
But that's who my dad was, right? And now I'm getting emotional.
But your dad knew your personality.
Yeah, he
knew.
Did.
He knew you didn't have to know anything about signs and graphics. He knew that you.
He knew you were that extra degree guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He did, right? And that's the thing about your dad. He's going to give you the support that you need. He's going to tell you. He's going to tell you what you need to know in order to make the decision that you want to make, right? And that's exactly, he hit the nail right on the head. He knew who I was, right?
Yeah.
And he had faith and belief in that I could do whatever I wanted to do if I put my mind to it, I think is what it came down to.
The extra degree guy. I love that. Yeah.
The extra degree guy. Yeah.
And he was able to see you get open.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And I think he ended up passing away about almost a year into it. But, at least I was able to show him that, hey, I actually, I sold something, believe it or not.
I did something, Dad. Well, wasn't he an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So my dad, actually my grandfather and my dad, they were entrepreneurs, right? They started Clinton's first and Iowa's largest home-owned discount store back in 1964, right? So I was born in St. Louis, 2 months old. They moved to Clinton, Iowa. Nobody knew where Clinton, Iowa was. It's a small little town on the Mississippi River. And it was, but at the time in 1964, it was starting to grow. And so they opened up that discount store and they ran that business for, it ended up my dad and grandfather ran it. Then they ended up starting a second one in Iowa City, Iowa. And then my brother ended up going into the business and ran it for the last 30 years that it was open. So it was open for 55 years, a very highly successful, discount store business in Iowa. And it was open for 55 years until my brother wanted to retire. And then, so it was.
Wow. So lots of entrepreneurship in that family.
Yeah. So I always knew, I had done startups in medical device, probably 4 or 5, always with somebody else's money, never with my own, right? Which is good and bad. I mean, working for, venture capital and private equity, that's, it's an interesting experience, probably one of the, certainly one of the most rewarding things because you learn just a ton. But then starting your own company with your own money, that is a whole different level of experience. So sure. I did get a chance. And that was one of these things that I guess I kind of wanted to know is, can I do this? Can I start my own company, build it up and sell it? And that's kind of what provided me with the motivation to start Image 212, right? Is that I wanted to start a company, build it up and sell it. I thought it was going to take 5 years. It ended up happening in 3. So it worked out. sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right? And,
well, I think it was a combination of both. So you had a set plan, a business plan, an exit strategy, which is really crucial. And you were going to get to X amount of dollars in 5 years and then sell. You accomplished that in 3, but you did not have it listed.
Right.
Correct. So tell us a little bit about how all that evolved for you.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about, competition and collaboration in the industry. And so one of the people, I started working early on. I remember meeting this guy named Joe Mello, right? And I remember looking at his website early on, and he made a lot of electric signs, and he did a lot of big work. And I remember I was driving home from a customer one time, and I remember calling him, and he goes, "Oh yeah, man, come swing by." He goes, "Come check us out." And I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And so I literally rerouted, drove down to Mello Signs, and I meet this guy, Joe Mello. He's like 35 years old. I walk into this place. This place is huge. It's like 30,000 square feet. I got 2,000 square feet, right? Up at Image 212. And he's like, "Yeah, dude, let me show you around." We tour around. He's doing all this fabrication. There's signs literally bigger than my house in there, right? and it was just, and he was just such a cool dude, right? And I'm like, "Well, how'd you do this?" Right? And he's like, "Oh, I bought this company, whatever it was." And anyway, he had built up this great business. So he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, would you ever make signs for, a little guy like me?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "We do it all the time." He goes, "We make signs for, he mentioned a couple of guys that I knew." And he goes, "I make signs, with this guy named Roger, we do signs for him. We make some other signs for these other people." And I'm like, "That's awesome." So all of a sudden I started sending him some jobs, and I started, using him as my wholesaler. And that evolved, right? So we ended up, I was using a few different fabricators in town, but he ended up becoming my primary fabricator for my electric signs and outdoor signs, and also did a lot of my installations, my monument signs. I think, by the end of the second year, we were probably doing almost, probably 400 to 500 grand of business with him at a wholesale rate, right? So then all of a sudden I'm in year 3, we're 6 months into it, and he's like, "Have you ever thought about selling?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm always thinking about selling."
Sure.
So what ended up happening and he, because we were getting some pretty decent jobs, and I think, he was excited about what we were doing in marketing, right? We were generating a bunch of leads through our marketing and web advertising, and he was like, "I'm not having that same experience, right, with the number of leads." And he's tried a bunch of different marketing companies, and so I think what attracted him is he saw the business that we were doing. Obviously, he could convert that wholesale business into retail business overnight if he acquired me. He saw what we were doing in the marketing department, and we were, I think, generating at the time about 200 to 250 leads a month through our marketing. Wow. And I think, for a guy that had been in business 10 or 12 years, I think he was like that. That even
impressed
like,
him,
wow,
of
right?
course.
I mean, he was like, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So I think there were some things that we were doing on the marketing side, and the types of customers that we were attracting, and the business that we were generating. And I think he saw that as, what, and we shared a lot of the same philosophies, right? I mean, he's all about the customer experience. We were all, we were obsessed with the customer experience, right? Yeah. I mean, that was what we lived for, is make these customers happy. You make these customers happy, it's going to bring more business in. So he liked that, I think, approach that we had, because it was similar to his, right? And so, then at that time, we ended up connecting with our preferred partner at Sign World. They said, let's do a valuation. What's this thing worth, right? And they did the valuation. I shared it with him. He's like, let's do it. So
here you are.
Here we are.
And so when did that sale finalize?
So March of 2023.
March of 2023.
And that was literally like 3 years and a month
yeah.
from the time that we started. A couple of years faster than I thought, but we had hit our mark of over $2 million in revenue, which is for 3 years wasn't bad for a guy from Iowa, right?
No, not bad at all. Awesome. So I know you shared that was a hard 3 years, right?
Yeah,
you worked hard.
Yeah, for sure, right? And I think anytime, look, that's who I am, right? It's like I've got an on switch and I have an off switch. And it's like, and my kids are grown, and I had a supportive person that was cheering me on.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a lot of outside distractions, right? And that's kind of who I am. It's like, I love to work, right? I love to do what I do. And that's what I did for 3 years. So it was a lot of work, but what makes it cool is that if you put your time, effort, energy into something, and you devote your life to it, then when it's done, it's like you can look back and say, was it worth it? Well, yeah, because I got developed relationships with people. I had I accomplished something that I'd always wanted to accomplish. I could say, hey, I hit one of the things on my bucket list. I learned, an enormous amount. I got a chance to meet some cool people, and now, and I think we were able to help a bunch of people, right?
Yes. I have an amazing sign. I'll just put a plug in for my rental property in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, at my entrance, and then on the cabin itself, made by Image 212 Graphics and Signs. It's super cool. It's reflective. It's you can see it from way down the street in the dark. So
we have little banners hanging in our offices from.
We do. We do have our signage in our offices is from you also. So one last thing before we wrap up, I'm so grateful for all that you've shared, all the insight of your experience. If somebody's listening to this podcast and wants to know, just a tip from you about getting started into business and maybe how they might go about doing it, what would you share for them?
Well, I think, in all seriousness, you guys, I met you in this process, right? And I think having somebody, and we talked a lot. I'm sure you're probably thinking,
once a week, it was every Monday.
Are you going to ever do something, Dick? Right? But I think having an opportunity to talk through this with somebody, that's a real value, right? You guys have been helping, people that are deciding if they want to get into the business. So I think having somebody that you can talk to about that, and I never ever, I mean, for God's sakes, I think I went on for 6 or 7 months. So I never felt pressured, right? You kind of let me discover this on my own and figure this out on my own. And, I needed to do that. Somebody can't sell me a franchise or they can't sell me a business.
No.
I had to figure that out on my own.
Yes.
Right. But that gave me the opportunity at my pace to do what I wanted to do. And, I got exposed to looking at a lot of different things. Right. So I think one is, take the time to do the research and to the point where you're comfortable. The average person, I think it takes 6 to 8 weeks to figure it out. Right. And again, maybe I'm a little slower than normal, but I think I learned a lot along the discovery process and learning about it. So that would be one, is just take the time to research to the point where you're comfortable with whatever decision that you're going to do. The second thing is that if you've never done a startup, they're hard. They're hard. I mean, and you know what? If you think it's, 40 hours a week, it's not. Mm-hmm. So I would say you gotta put in the time, effort, and energy if you want to have success. And, but there's payoff to the time, effort, and energy that you put in. That makes it more rewarding. If you work, 40 hours a week and you did that, then you're not going to feel as good. But if you put in that time, effort, and energy and you gave it all you had, at the end of it, when you achieve what you wanted to achieve, it's extremely gratifying. So that would be the second thing. The last thing is that, work with people, because there's so many people that I found in Sign World that want to help you to be successful. And even outside of Sign World, people want to help people accomplish their dreams and accomplish their goals. So work with those people and take advantage of that. And that's what I'm doing now, right? I'm trying to help other people in their journey. And that's, to me, that's a ton of fun. And I don't, and now I'm almost officially retired. I have 15 hours a week, right? So.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening ever.
No, I don't see
with
that
that
either.
energy level.
But to clarify, just for our listeners, he's now working with Sign World in their franchise development division to educate and coach other prospective business owners about the Sign World opportunity.
So if someone wanted to learn more about Sign World, how would you direct them?
So the best thing is you can always, just go to our website, signworld.org, right?
Yeah.
And that's one way. You can always call me. I can give you my cell phone, 612-875-3114. Give me a call. I'm happy to, introduce you to Sign World and chat with you and see if it's the right fit. And it's not right for everybody, right?
No.
But it certainly is right for some people. And if you like that no rules, no royalty thing, that's actually a really big deal.
And you want to build your own brand.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Very unique.
Yeah. I mean, we were doing business in 45 states when I sold the company, right? So that's a big deal. I can't think of many other franchises where you could do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So
thank you, Dick, for joining us today. You're a wealth of knowledge. You've got a great story, great energy, a lot of fun. So thank you for sharing, taking time out of your very busy week.
Your 15-hour work week. Thank you.
It's always awesome to chat with you guys. You guys always are a joy to be with. So thanks for the invitation, and always happy to participate in any way I can.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Right.
So for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in. Please follow Sarah and I on LinkedIn. I'm Roxanne Rapske, Rapske. She's Sarah Waskow, Waskow. You can learn more about what we do at frannet.com. You can also learn more about us and watch our podcast on our YouTube channel at Frannet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. Or you can listen to Unpredicted Entrepreneur on any of the podcasting platforms. Bye.
Bye-bye.